And welcome back. Mekong NYC is a social justice organization that is bringing dignity and value to the lives of Southeast Asians in the Bronx and also throughout New York City. Now, the organization does this through community organizing as well as movement building, centered healing through arts and culture, and creating a soft safety net through community power. And joining us now, we're pleased to have the campaign director of Mekong NYC. We've got Khamarin Nhann, who's with us as well. And thank you, Khamarin, for being with us.
Thank you so much. Welcome to be with you.
Thank you. And so when we talk about social justice, let me just ask you the question from your perspective. How do you define social justice as a social justice organization?
So for very multi-layered, very intersectional. For me, I think about all the different things that we provide as a community-based organization, right? Thinking about what are some of the, systems and structures that continue to put harm in our communities? What are the things that continue to put barriers that make it that much harder to access, whether it's service, to access a better quality of life, as well as some of the things that it take you to live a happy and healthy day, right? And so for me, social justice includes everything from, making sure that you have food on the table, making sure you have somewhere safe to live, making sure you have access to a good paying job, as well as making sure you're living in a safe neighborhood and community. And so what are some of the things, the root causes for us as a community to really name and understand the history of that? What does that mean and look like? And what is our place in making sure that we continue to fight and uplift systems and structures that continue to put harm in our communities, and making sure that we're doing this in a way that benefits everyone and making sure we're leaving no one behind.
I know that Mekong NYC does a good job of really tackling the issue of health justice. And when we talk about health and the inequities that so many people face, let's talk about your organization and how you're on the front line doing that. What are some of the things that people can know when you talk about health justice from your perspective?
Definitely. So for Mekong, health justice is at the very root of our work. We believe that, organizing and healing is intersectional and very impactful in the work that we do. Mekong, our community members, specifically the Vietnamese and Cambodian refugee and immigrant communities from the Bronx, come from a history of war, violence, and genocide. And so for us, we are walking embodiment of intergenerational trauma, understanding what that means in our bodies, our spirits, understanding like how that has deeply impacted our life and our daily routine. And so, our communities coming over as refugees during the early 80s to the Bronx and through the country, like we also experience all the different hardships that other communities of color continue to deal with, right? So for us, it's just more levels in which that we understand what healing looks like. And healing also can for us, thinking about our community, our culture, our heritage, right? What are some of the traditions what are the rituals that keeps us grounded, keeps us centered, but then also recognizing that history is very important. And so for us, like any space that we go through, we need to make sure we're naming those narratives as part of our history, but then also understanding like we too are dealing with the same systems structures, right? We talk about social determinants of health. What are the things that impact our daily life, and what are the things that continue to inhibit us to have that better quality of life? And so those things, we walk very heavily in understanding, whether it's through arts and culture programs that we do to pass traditions, making sure that we're uplifting our language and culture, as well as making sure that, we are connected with our community and our environment, right? Making sure that the common struggle is actually something that connects all of us. And so understanding those health disparities and understanding that health justice is a very big umbrella to all the different work that we do. We think of it as a very holistic approach in our work.
Yeah. And I also want to take the time to talk about some of the struggles. You said common struggles. And one of the common struggles I think a lot of people face in New York City is economic security, jobs, income, being able to live affordably. I know your organization has done a good job of providing emergency assistance to those who've been in need. Share with us a little bit about the emergency assistance program and the recipients of that.
Absolutely. So I think everyone's seen and saw how this COVID pandemic impacted everyone across the board. I think there's no denying that. But I think one of the biggest things that we continue to name is that the pandemic just highlighted ongoing existence and struggles that communities of color have been facing for generations. And so for us, like understanding like what would be the best way for us to attack that. And so, very much like everyone else, like we had to shut down our office, had to work remotely, understanding this new world that we had to go in. And so that doesn't change the fact that communities still needed support, still needed services, still needed the resources that were very much needed to them. And so for us, we always say that we are the safety net of our community members because of these disparities. And so some of the very first things that we did was start doing community check-ins, right? Calling our community members, seeing how are they doing, seeing if they had access to the information and resources when we were just learning about the pandemic. And so early on, we were talking about like, what are some of the things that we can support around, health supplies, hand sanitizers, mask, gloves. And then we started talking about like care packages, like, making sure that we have, some vegetables, some fruits, some produce, things that we can give to our community members. And part of that, we were talking about like, what does emergency fund and mutual aid look like, right? Making sure that a lot of our community members are elders and don't have access and can't physically work 9-to-5 jobs, right? And so what are some of the ways that they can get benefits in cash? And so we were able to do like emergency funds, able to give out a $500 stipend to community members as like this one-time thing to help support, groceries, support whatever the things that they were going through at that time. And so for us, that just opened up like the continued need for a service like that. And so right now in this moment, we're actually still, talking about what does mutual aid can look like in our community, having like a fund or pot that can be controlled by community to help support when someone's, going through a hard struggle. This is one way that we can tap in and help support with the guidance and leadership of community member to be able to participate and redefine in our own sense of like what mutual aid could look like.
Yeah. You talk about access and aid. I want to go back to a little bit about that health justice, because I know that you've had some challenges, particularly with the Montefiore health system and how it impacts actually its proposed moving, because there's going to propose move that's going to actually impact a lot of people. Make our viewers aware a little bit about the situation going on in Montefiore and the potential impact that it has for your constituents.
Definitely. So one of the ongoing local campaigns we're working right now is the Save Family Health Center. So for folks that don't know, the Family Health Center is located at 401 Plaza. And so over the last few months, we've heard that there were going to be changes in services that were going to be provided. Doctors were going to be moved, services were going to be closed. And this center is a federally qualified health center. It provides a multitude of services, family medicine, women reproductive support. It has residency program, and also houses a Southeast Asian mental health program. And so for us, when we heard of these things, community members were triggered, were traumatized of like, yet again, we're being displaced. So what we heard is that in this moment, there's 3 existing clinics and there will be like a shuffle of them. So there's the Grand Concourse Clinic, there's the Family Health Center, and then the Williamsburg Family Health Center. So what we've heard was that the Grand Concourse Center would be closing and moving staff and doctors into Family Health Center, and that staff from Family Health Center would be moving to Williamsburg Family Health Center. So essentially it's a big shuffle, but then ultimately the biggest thing for us is like, who was a part of that decision and who was included. And so what we've been told was that staff wasn't included, community and patients wasn't part of that deciding factor. And so for us, like we're thinking and talking about like how this continued to cause harm and impact communities across the board. And so like this center is very violent and creates stability in the community. And so, when we see like services being changed and, one thing being said and shared, but then the other thing too is like actions being moved. Like we continue to say the ways that services has changed over the years, less access to those things. And so for us, it's like making sure that this is a very prominent issue. Like any type of changes or closure will impact lives across the board for Bronxites. And so for us, making sure that we're uplifting that, understanding the needs of the community, especially in the Bronx, right? We are one of the most unhealthiest community in the Bronx, right? When we talk about health disparities from all communities of color. And so for us, any type of closure to any health center would be a big and drastic impact in our daily lives. So we wanted to make sure that this is something that continues to be uplifted and making sure that people can join the fight and really learn what's been going on.
Yeah, let me switch gears a little bit and move from talking about health and move over to housing, because housing is important too, right? And we know that there's so many people who are struggling to find affordable housing, and even for the people who are living today, just to be able to make it. COVID-19 has had a huge impact on a lot of people, displacing a lot of people. Some people not able to really maintain their living. But I know your organization has also been front and center in dealing with the issue of housing and also advocating for a lot of tenants. So let's talk about the work that's going on in terms of advocacy that you're making on behalf of so many tenants here in New York City.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things that we learned over the years is like, community organizing, advocacy is such a vital piece to our work. And thinking about from, local level, city level, state level, like advocating for our community members, making sure that the issues are being heard and felt, are being uplifted, and making sure that we're bringing this to our elected officials, right? Making sure we're bringing this to decision makers, to one, not only be able to have a seat at the table, but then also making sure that we're bringing our communities' narratives and stories and experiences to be part of those things. And so, a great example around the advocacy has been around our coalition building. So over the last few years through the pandemic, we've been able to build our Bronx-wide coalition made up of other community-based organizations throughout the Bronx to really fighting around, economic democracy and racial justice. And so, land use, housing has been a big issue, naming those health issues again, talking about the environment, talking about climate, talking about transportation, just to name a few of the different sectors that the coalition has been really working and advocating for. And so for us, it's around like community ownership. And it is about land, right? It's about making sure resources from the Bronx stay in the Bronx, but then also making sure like community has a say around that ownership and what that looks like. And so, the pandemic continues to just show how the system is very flawed. Knowing that the pandemic would freeze the way that people have access to jobs and wages, but then also having systems that are like pushing, community members and tenants out of the housing. So the biggest thing is like learning what are the actual mechanisms that forces someone to be evicted, but then learning like what are the actual resources that are needed and what are the ways that we can keep people in homes, and talk about what are the ways that we can own shared wealth. And so, part of that work is like community land trusts, making sure that, community understands like, hey, if there's vacant spaces or if there are, different land that is available for communities, say these are the spaces for us to be actually engaged, and this figuring out like what are the ways that we can continue to build wealth and resources in the Bronx.
Yeah. I want to talk and shift a little bit. You talk about community. One of the things that I know that you're also advocating for is that of nail salons. And that's pretty prevalent in the Asian immigrant community. A lot of business owners have gotten in the area of nail salons. What is it that you want the community to become more aware of? And talk a little bit about that advocacy, because you're really raising your voice to be a strong advocate.
Absolutely. So over the last few years, I think the nail salon industry has been a very big focal point around the state. Like it is an industry that is self-sufficient and has been, running in our communities for generations, right? And across the board, like I think any new immigrant or immigrant community sees that they have a local, nail salon shop that they go to, and so oftentimes like those conditions are very different, right, depending on the community that you go to. And so for us, over the last few years, working with our coalition partners around the country, like understanding what the standard looks like. So last year we was able to push a bill, a nail salon standard bill, to actually like level the playing field, right? When we talk about safe environments, when we talk about wage, we want to make sure that the industry doesn't just penalize, you know, nail salon owners and workers, but actually create a pathway to resources and actually being able to place for those conditions to be better. And anything when we talk about, these industries, whether it's nail salon, whether it's beauty shops, whether it's barber shops, the biggest thing is around how do we protect the integrity of these small businesses, right? These are amazing work in additions to community. So how do we make sure we uplift small businesses and provide those access to resources, right? When we saw the pandemic hit, a lot of shops had to shut down because there was no clear pathway to those things. But specifically too, like our nail salon work is around like organizing workers and owners to seeing that there's a place around like how do we create a better conditions, working environments, and making sure that there are living wages for us. And so, not just around the penalty piece and penalizing folks and shops, but then how do we make sure that there is clear, direct communication and actual process in making sure that we're getting these better conditions.
Yeah. When you talk about the issue of enforcement, I know that a lot of concern continues to go around deportation. So many people in our community are living under the fear of deportation. You have an anti-deportation initiative, I know as well. I want to get an opportunity to talk a little bit about that because talk about just the sentiment in the community right now, because we know that in years past, we've seen ICE operate at all-time highs. And a lot of people are really concerned, even though there has been a change in the presidential administration, that there is this still fear of deportation. So bring us a little insight as to what you're seeing and what you're hearing and your response within the community.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things that we continue to learn around this anti-deportation work, ICE's job is to continue to put fear in communities, right? Whether or not, we have a say of who gets to stay or go. I think the biggest thing is understanding like what are the mechanisms and systems and structures that continue to cause harm. And so for us, like, one of the two actually very big things that we've been working on over the last few years. So one, as part of our statewide work, we actually launched a Clemency Coalition of New York over the last few years. And this is really targeted around our work around commutations and providing pardons. So this work is around communities of color across the board. So making sure that we're advocating for folks that have been, been locked up, that has been doing very long time, and depending on their their age and condition, like commutation is a way to get them out to be able to be free. And then the pardon piece is like making sure that there's a clear process and pathway for people to actually apply for a pardon, to be able to be notified, and to actually be able to fight for their case to be released. And so that was the state level piece of the clemency work that we've been able to do over the last few years. One of the big federal things that we're actually gearing up to do is around our Southeast Asian Relief and Response Bill. And this is a bill that we've been working on to actually not only stop the deportation of Southeast Asian folks around the country, but actually bring people back that have been deported to Cambodia, Laos, and Vietnam. And so for us, we're actually gearing up a very monumental historical moment. Later this weekend, we're actually going to be heading to DC to do an official launch of this federal bill, making sure that we're educating the community about the work that's been going on over the last few years, like making sure that we are instilling education and understanding, families play a big role in the anti-deportation work, but then also making sure that there is a voice around this. I think for many, many years, this instillment of fear and stigma around someone that's being incarcerated or someone that done their time, like we want to very, very much understand those narratives and say like this has never been about a good immigrant, bad immigrant, right? This is always about what is the humanity and dignity that we want to uplift as part of the work that we do. And so, building that narrative, making sure that our community understands, and having those open conversations and dialogue too. And it's okay, like we do have a space for us to, disagree, but then also being mindful and open to having what that means it looks like. And so when you have someone who's been directly impacted, like share about these experiences and understand that we've all been impacted by the same systems and structures, I think that's when we get to real transformation and open dialogue.
So for people who want more information to get connected to your organization and the work that you do, what is available to them?
So you can directly reach us out at our email, mekong@mekongnyc.org. We are on all social media platforms, Mekong NYC on Facebook, on Instagram, Mekong NYC _. And so, yeah, please stay connected, please stay informed, and continue to celebrate community.
Khamarin Nhann, thank you so much for being with us in the work that Mekong NYC is doing, bringing us some very important information in terms of a community that sometimes is underserved and underrepresented, but you're standing on the front lines. Thanks so much, brother.
Thank you so much.
All righty. Well, we do have more here on the Social Justice Forums. We want you not to go anywhere. We're going to continue in a few seconds.